My name is Evan McMullen. I am the co-instigator and co-conspirator of the Disco, and I'm really excited to share with you all a little bit of the work of some awesome colleagues of mine who I have had the opportunity to learn from for about 6 years now. So Rocco, Joel, take us away. You guys want to start off with some intros, share a little bit more about how you come to the table today?
Sure. Hey, my name is Rocco. I'm co-founder of a company called Spruce, with Joel and Evan with me working on identity and data. Specifically got into the space a number of years ago as we all came from Consensus a while back. It was very early to identity, but a lot of the focus for Spruce right now is letting users control their identifier and data across the web, specifically with sign-in with Ethereum. So how does a user log into sites and services using an identifier they control and bring data with them to a session? I'm excited to be here.
I think I gotta turn on.
Let's try again. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Joel, co-founder of a company called 3box Labs, and building a network called Ceramic. And Ceramic comes from an insight that in order to create systems for identity, we can't focus on just like building a wallet for an identity because identity is like not easy to define. And so we see identity more as just like an emergent phenomena based on all of your interactions. And so hence we built a data network.
So guys, let's start off with a little historical context. Why do you work on identity? Why do you care about this stuff? Why does it matter?
Sure, I'll take that one. For me, a lot of it came from a number of years back. There was a site called My Shadow, and what it did specifically was you would select a site or service that they had listed, namely it was Google, it was Facebook, it was a lot of large tech giants back in the day, and they would take the terms of service and the privacy policy, and they would specifically highlight everything that actually mattered to a human being because, as we all know, none of us kind of really, with a fine-tooth comb, go through a terms of service. And made me kind of realize in that moment how much is collected on me as I go through my journey in digital interactions, specifically with digital identity in particular. And getting into the space, kind of Web3 area, you start to realize when you have these kind of keys that you control and these wallets that you control, they kind of act as this base thing that no one can really pull the rug on. That these keys that you control that you've generated are in your control at all times, and that if you had a Google account, for example, and you got the rug pulled on you, you wouldn't just lose access to Google services, it's everything you signed into Google with as well. So having these keys became this root of like, oh, this is really cool, what more can I do with these keys? Can I then start to build an identity based on these keys? And how can I make that easier for people? And for me, that was kind of the journey in.
I think for me, it's mainly frustration with kind of existing Web 2 approaches to identity and just having used open source software for a long time, doesn't really align with how Web 2 companies' business models, and it's just like doing something that's more native to open source and eventually what became crypto is a motivation for me.
So let's bring it to today. Let's start off with a little feelings check-in. How are we feeling about wallets? Right? What's working well for us? What's infuriating? What's not going so well? Where can we improve? So just sort of general, immediate, when I ask you your feelings about your wallet experience today, Rocco, where does that take us?
It's a little all over the place. I will never say that I don't appreciate the amount of work that's been put into wallets over time. It's still one of the greatest UX improvements over how keys were managed previously before crypto. And that's why crypto has also become the largest key adoption event in history, because wallets have made it that easy to do so. But right now, there's always a very difficult balance between protecting users and abstracting experiences to let users not have to dive 20 layers deep before they feel comfortable actually using a wallet. And that's still one of these tricky situations. How much do you display to a user? How deep in detail do you go with users? Because if it's very cliche to talk about hey, if I gave my mom a wallet, would she understand when she's sending a transaction all of these additional details? Or would she want to know that this amount is going from point A to point B and that's kind of the end of it? But at the same time, because we are allowing more user control and more modes of failure for certain folks, we might have to disclose more information. So the UX part is always going to be tricky, but I feel like folks are making really good strides in this area. So wallets, I'm kind of still not feeling too great, but feeling good at the same time. It's kind of a balance. It's that we're getting there, and it's taking a while, but still, it's one of the hardest problems to solve is how much information do you give users at the end of the day.
All right, Joel, feelings check-in. How does your wallet make you feel?
Kind of fine. It does its job, and I think yes, we need to focus on like making the user experience better, but I also feel like when there are crypto use cases, people tend to kind of figure it out. So there's like both worlds there. What I'm not feeling great about though is just like I end up having been in the space for a long while, end up having more and more wallets that I need to keep track of, and that's a little bit annoying.
It's also across like 20 different applications, like 5 different extensions, 5 different mobile apps that I just kind of lose track of literally everything. I was also going to say,
Yeah, and a bunch of different like hardware wallets. that have, like, different,
hardware wallets, desktop wallets, and also Evan, for you, how's it been for you as well?
Oh my gosh. Well, so at Disco, we think that you are like a disco ball. You are the multifaceted center of the party. You should reflect your data and your identity to the world however you decide. We believe that the atomic unit of Web3 is a human being because you're the same person who shows up to your Bitcoin address and your Ethereum address and your other Ethereum address and your other Ethereum address and so on and so forth. And so, you know, from our perspective, the atomic unit of Web3 is not a wallet address. It is not a public key. It is a person. We are building human coordination tools, emphasis on the human. And so if the canonical definition of, you know, an atomic unit in Web3 is a wallet address, then we have a sort of a funny divergence of how reality exists and how we're representing identities on chain. And so when we think about wallets, you know, what is a wallet in the context of a human being for Web3? Like, is a public address representative of an individual, of an organization? How might we reconcile multiple addresses in this way?
I just realized something. Like the normal wallet I have in my pocket doesn't have an address. I think that's like the main difference between like a crypto wallet and just like a wallet that people are used to. And I think that address, that identifier, like, is something that makes this question a little bit more tricky. Because you can't like find someone by saying, hey, what's the address of your wallet in your pocket? Or you can't send money to the wallet in your pocket. Because if the question was about the wallet in my pocket, I would be like, it's not really, I have my driver's license there maybe. But since it's public, it's something that needs to be managed.
I was about to say too, with like this kind of physical versus digital, I don't think physical wallets will ever, I mean, maybe we'll have like kind of like e-ink kind of display wallets in the future, but in terms of like online presence and people in wallets, I think sometimes about like social dramaturgy and like accounts online, that you are a different person, and the same way you're talking about like reflecting different ways, that, you know, you have your account on a social media site that you follow your family and you talk to your family, and then you have that other account that you don't show your family, that you only show your friends, because your family will probably be appalled at some of the things you post on there. So, and each of those accounts have a different way of reflecting you, and it's translating that to wallets is going to be pretty like a difficult journey too. And I wonder if there's a way to like bridge this in, where you have this kind of account model, the same way you have like Facebook Pay, for example, but you're paying to a certain account, and slowly start to, not to say that we have to like take things from Web2 because the goal is to break away from some of these bad paradigms, but like some ways you can have like, this account is this version of me, and this is how I get paid on this account. Because in the space we operate in, there is this intrinsic link between the keys that we use for blockchain transactions and the way we think about keys and how it relates to identity. The goal would be to abstract these two things in two different ways, but like managing that's still going to be very, very difficult.
And, you know, I'm sure there will be plenty of discussion later today about 4337, the way that we can achieve abstraction. But I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, Rocco, which is that, you know, the expression of our wallets right now is purely financial. Right? We have succeeded in Web3 where PGP failed because we had an economic incentive to manage your private keys, to not lose them because we had money on them. But now when we talk about wallets, we can't really talk about human expression because you are more than the contents of your wallet. If any of you have seen the movie Fight Club, it's a great line from it. But you are like a whole person, right? You have a favorite color, you have friends, you have co-conspirators, you have frenemies, you have favorite projects, and you know, you're attending WalletCon today, and very little of this information is appropriate to express on a blockchain, let alone available. So when we contemplate being able to play more interesting coordination games than group chat with bank account, OpenSea collection management, and group casino, how might we introduce more facets of our identity into the expression and interactions of our wallets? Like, what does it look like to be more than a pile of money in Web3? Rocco, start us off.
I was going to say experiences. It's been nice to see additional strides in the space around like the social media boom. Like, how do we get decentralized social media? How do we have like chat interfaces so that folks can like communicate using their keys? Even gaming experiences too. Like, I saw the recent launch with the Unity SDK for MetaMask. I'm like, cool. Like, now we could have usage kind of beyond just the financial side. And I think that's the core answer for me. It's like, how do we just get past group? I love Group Casino, by the way. How do we get past that? It's experiences. It's beyond like think of dApps and which ones don't have a financial aspect to it. And that forces you into a mode of operation that doesn't include transactions like that, but includes more about you and not just moving money.
We need things that do stuff. Real quick, Joel, before you answer, show of hands, who in this room has used a non-financial dApp more than once this week? Oh, we got like 7 people. Incredible. So this time next year at WalletCon, I want to see all our hands in the air because it is incumbent upon us to build things that do stuff. Joel, what are you thinking?
Well, for science, who here in the last week has actually used a dApp?
Hey.
Yeah, so I think the thing you said about just like more experiences is important, but I think we also want to do that in a way which is secure. And right now, like a lot of the applications that we use, like all of the dApps, like actually use signatures and like the security we get from our wallets when we put data on chain. But then we just like sign into some server and then put a bunch of data on that server. And that's kind of, okay, we get the good experience, but for that app. So I think what we should be asking ourselves is how can we make all our interactions verifiable and then make the experience good? I don't want to sign all of my likes with my wallet, but like how can we get the best of those two worlds?
Yeah, I was going to say, while also reconciling like consent with wallets too, because we still are in this like mode where we need to make sure we triple, quadruple, quintuple check what we're doing with our wallet because of this link between just signing a message and sending a transaction. You're always like, do you quintuple check whenever you like a post online? It's still just this strange mode of operation. This goes back to the UX question as well, of like still getting there, but still kind of tricky. Because how we interact online is like, I know that the consequences in certain interactions will be social, for Twitter, for example, but my wallet isn't going to be drained. And there's this like clear disconnect. And I wonder if there's a way of like getting there in the future. Could be through like account abstraction, but like that's also a big part of it.
Alpha Leak later today did 4337. Didn't hear it from me. Don't tell my co-founder, Johnny. I told you guys. But anyway, so we were talking also earlier today about the challenge of bringing off-chain reputational data to our on-chain interactions using our wallets. At Disco, we use the delegatable framework from MetaMask to generate a signature at the app layer and pass that to a smart contract, proving that you have the right off-chain data without revealing that on-chain data, that data on-chain and publicly when you're gaining access control to a permission DeFi pool or an NFT mint or whatever that on-chain logic is. What are some other methods that we might use to preserve the legal compliance around GDPR and CCPA, as well as privacy of off-chain data, while still using it as a game piece in our smart contract interactions? Like, what other options do we have here, Joel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first step is probably just get the data that we store off-chain to be signed by the issuer or by yourself, so you actually can look at that data at some point later and see where it came from and like the authenticity of that. And then whether you store that data off-chain in public or off-chain in private, it kind of depends on the use case. But then like the main question is like, how do we get this on-chain? And I think depending on the use case, you probably want to leverage some kind of zero knowledge proof to compress it and put only the information you need for the on-chain application.
Part of it I always thought of like, what if there's like an Oracle service that just stamps things on chain that you can trust in certain ways? I mean, obviously trust model is going to be tricky for that, but like, how do you have like these off-chain credentials and just a service that you can go to and just they kind of stamp it for you for those use cases in particular, like if it's a smart contract interaction or if it's like an NFT mint, for example? Yeah,
I think that like Oracle's is look at off-chain data, whether it's like generated by users or testers or whatever. We're probably going to be needed for a long while because it's going to take a while before we have zero knowledge virtual machines that are extremely efficient to like do any type of computation. So there's going to be a balance there for many years probably.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's going to be a minute, but in the interim, we can already use our existing EVM compatible key pairs like a personal notary stamp, thanks to EIP 712. So we can sign, off-chain data and carry it around with us, as Joel is just suggesting. But in order to do that from an organizational perspective, to have like an observer notary bot extension in your browser that signs your actions or gives them over to you, that's definitely going to require some more effort. So to get kind of tactical about the experiences that are made possible combining wallets, the infrastructure that you guys are building, would love to hear a little bit more about some of your favorites. Like, who is building in your universe that this room needs to know about? Who is being thoughtful about the role of wallets and interactions that leverage decentralized infrastructure underneath?
From our end, the stuff is Bruce, we're really excited about. It's everything kind of around signing with Ethereum. It's been nice to see a balance, though, of Web3 projects that have picked it up. Obviously doing the work with wallets to make sure that the interfaces are there, so if a user is signing in with Ethereum, that the wallet shows them a sign-in request rather than just like sign a random message. And the other side of it for us we've really seen has been nice to see like kind of enterprises experiment with it as well. So we did some work with Auth0 for more traditional authentication setups where you could sign in with Ethereum to an Auth0 powered app. So as part of their marketplace, like they could kind of offer it alongside their existing offerings, like sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook. Now you have sign in with Ethereum. And I think for a lot of traditional apps, it might be that bridge where they still need to kind of offer a lot of things for traditional users and have that alongside it for users to finally feel comfortable doing something like that, or to start kind of garnering some Web3 users in there and start introducing non-Web3 users to it. And then also recently Shopify picking up their blockchain tooling and also using the sign-in with Ethereum libraries. It's been really cool because now you can have storefronts with like token-gated access, and now you can kind of have these blended experiences in traditional land. And that setup, if anyone's participated in the KZG ceremony for Ethereum, the same setup they use for sign-in with Ethereum, the OpenID Connect server, is the same stuff we use to power the Auth0 implementation. So yeah, it's been good to see.
Cool, yeah, so over at Ceramic, we of course really like the work that you guys at Spruce has been pushing with signing with Ethereum. But instead of using it to sign in to a server that an app operator runs, we let apps generate a session key that lives in the browser and use sign in with Ethereum to delegate access to the session key. And one application, there are many different applications of this, of course. One that I'm excited about is a project called Lateral that builds a knowledge graph in the science space, where they essentially allow scientists across the world to contribute to this graph of information. And as they sign in to Ethereum to the front end of this app and start generating nodes in this graph, they actually have an association between all the actions that take in the app to their Ethereum address, which enables Lateral to, at some point later in time, look at all these contributions and start dripping rewards to all these scientists. So like that type of application, I think is really exciting.
And I definitely also want to bring it back to the wallets there too, because a lot of the work we collaborate on deals specifically like with these authorizations. And for signing in, it's one thing. You have this like, you know the action you're taking when you're authenticating. You're like signing into the service is like, yep, that's you, you're signed in. The next step is like, how do you do these forms of delegation? How do you like access off-chain resources when you're signing in? So a lot of the work now is like, how do you bundle these types of requests, not just authentication, but also authorizations? Like, when you sign in with Google and they want to access your contacts or access your drive, you usually get like a pop-up that's like, hey, the site is also requesting access to this. How do you start recreating that in Web3? Well, the interface is going to be wallets. And similarly, it's that same situation where these like authorization requests are just this random string of letters and numbers that aren't human readable whatsoever, with the goal being in the wallet that when a user is taking this action, there is some way that they know what the hell they're doing. That there is starting with some human readable way that the user is saying, oh, okay, I hereby authorize these different actions, or see what they're delegating to, with the hope that continued work with wallets brings better interfaces to those things as well.
Yeah, so like if you want to dive deeper into exactly what Rocco just talked about, there's an EIP called Recap. I don't remember the numbers, like 30.
5573. They didn't give us 4362 because they said it has to be related to the PR number, and I was very upset about that.
So Recap is really cool because it allows you to do these kind of capability delegations, so giving an app access to some particular resource, while doing it in a way which even if you sign this message on a hardware wallet with like a little screen and you can scroll through the message, you can still get an idea of what you're actually giving the app access to. while at the same time allowing more sophisticated wallets to look at this message and parse it and display like a really nice interface for the user. So I really like, if you're interested in this, just like look at the recap spec, because it's really cool what it actually has achieved.
And I think that's for all of us. It's like, as developers on the identity side with wallets, we'll try our best to meet you halfway. There's only so much we can do from our side in terms of trying to make these interfaces as cleanly as possible without any intervention from the wallets or requesting the wallets to change anything with their interfaces. But our goal is to make these things, get it there so the user at least can read what's going on, with the wallets taking the baton and starting to work on better interfaces once something is standardized, which is the big part of the whole kind of standards part of this, where once there's a standard for it, the wallet could be like, okay, now we'll take the standard, we'll make interfaces for it so it's even better for the user. But from our side, we can't control wallet interfaces, but we can do at least is try to make things as human readable, as human friendly as possible along the way.
So as enthusiastic as we are about Sui, as much as we have come up in the Ethereum ecosystem, we must acknowledge that other chains exist, and that human beings are not bound to underlying protocols. In fact, probably already today on our phones, we have used multiple apps that are built on multiple underlying protocols without contemplating those switching costs or the fact that that stack has been different than from one app to another. So as we contemplate improving UX, from the wallet layer on down the stack in a multi-chain world, what does that mean for your team and your practice, and how might we as builders in this room today get serious about acknowledging the world beyond Ethereum and incorporating as many people as we can into a united Web3 experience?
I think the answer is pretty much copy pasta.
Love it.
Yeah, sign in with anything. So me and Rocco have both been collaborating in a standards body called Chain Agnostic Standards Alliance, and there's been a bunch of work to make standards that work kind of across chain. So there's a way to represent an account in a chain agnostic way. So that can be like, hey, I care about this specific Ethereum account on maybe the girly testnet, and you can have a reference to that particularly. Or you have a reference to like, hey, I care about this particular address on the Dogecoin network. And all of these accounts can be represented in like a standardized format. And then after signing with Ethereum became a thing, we realized we can just kind of make a chain agnostic standard for this and make sign in with whatever wallet work the same way as sign in with Ethereum.
Yeah, so long as you could sign a message like that, making sure the format is there, and yeah, working for like Solana, working for things in the Cosmos ecosystem, but just recreating that same experience. And again, giving wallet implementers another way to be like, okay, I understand this. It's not going to change and derive from the spec too much. We can make it happen. And especially, yeah, it's like kind of how do you bring all of these identities together at the end of the day? Because all of us, we joked earlier about having 20 Ethereum accounts. We probably also have like another 20 cross-chain accounts somewhere else and are losing track by the moment of all of them.
So as we think about, expanding in a cross-chain capacity, we're also thinking about, building up the stack and making experiences more accessible to human beings. So kind of question for you guys, like, do you think of custodial wallets as an opportunity or an abomination?
An opportunity for whom?
So I think, in discussion, as Rocco was noting earlier, a lot of Web 2 organizations see great promise in Web 3 and think, aha, we have the opportunity to bring these technologies to our community, but they are not yet ready to manage their own keys. And so in negotiating, how we bring the world to Web 3, how do we contemplate, how can we responsibly, as builders in the wallet and identity space, think about progressive decentralization? Starting off someone's Web3 journey without demanding that they manage private keys, is that an option for us to explore? Is that something we should explore? Or is that a non-starter that violates the principles that have brought us here today?
Well, it's not a non-starter because we can't really stop anyone from doing it. And
permissionlessness, we love to see it.
Yeah, I mean, I think why not? Like, if it's not like stopping anyone from having their own self-custodied wallet, I don't think it's like actually hurting. It's probably like helping the ecosystem. But I think like people who are building custodial wallets might want to think about giving the user an exit as kind of being nice to them.
Yeah, that's definitely where I agree there. It's like I'll never fault anyone for making a custodial wallet because if it at least gives someone access to start, you know, gaining a bit of knowledge in the space, learning how to manage keys, like by seeing what's out there, I'm kind of okay with. But I think more leaning towards like the eject button, where like that even if you're designing a custodial solution, there should always be a pointer towards an eject button for users. Even if you're doing like a managed service, there should always, in my own opinion, just be a way that users always have the option to do it themselves. Even if it's embedded in the service or the service points users towards that. I think if it's like a custodial wallet where they're just like, yeah, let's keep you here forever, that's where it's like, I think I disagree with the philosophy there, especially with this space. But as long as that service is like, this is custodial, this is the trust model that we have, this is who you're trusting to do this thing, and here's a way that if you ever wanted to kick us out, you could, which is the fun of Web3 and also like against traditional businesses that want to keep you locked in, then I kind of hat tip to them because that's where I think really it should go.
I tend to agree with you guys, and I think the pragmatism of building, in a society full of human beings who are already here is something that we sometimes forget with the purity tests of decentralization. So when we talk about decentralization, like, what does that mean to you? Is it the metal? Is it the data? Is it the signing keys? Is it the feelings? Like, what does that mean when we talk about it in this context? Because I know that, custodial conversation is acceptable when it is couched with an exit strategy to this ultimate decentralization. But when we take a step back and think about this in the context of, wallets and our data, like, what does that mean to you on your team? How do you guys practice decentralization? Do you have a purity test in your practice?
I would say with Spruce in particular, we're strong believers in local consensus as like the first step in all this, that you don't have to necessarily have this like big decentralized network where, everyone can be adversarial and like it still functions and you're able to operate, but rather, especially in the context of data, that a user so long as they have the choice of where that data lives, whether it's with a custodian, with multiple custodians and a server in their basement, or only on the server in their basement, so long as they have the choice, that, in my opinion, and Spruce is more decentralized in a way. It can be data can be thrown at a decentralized network, but at the end of the day, so long as the user has that choice of it could live in these places and I'm determining where it lives across multiple hosts, and it could always live on the server in my basement or the server that I control solely, then if that is an option, then it is decentralized. And I could still operate. Yeah, and I could still operate in all these systems. Just it might be at some efficiency sake, but it is always an option. Sorry.
Yeah, for those who've been in the space for a while, might have heard of this concept of physical decentralization versus logical decentralization. So if you think about a blockchain, for example, like Ethereum, it's physically decentralized. It runs on computers all across the world, but it's logically centralized. You go to one place to look for the state, and everyone kind of agrees on that. And I think what we can leverage more in the crypto community, especially when it comes to like identity and data, is actually logical decentralization as well. So there isn't like one global state that's shared across all of the internet for all of our data, but that can be completely local or sharded across like a set of nodes, but not everything together in one place.
Yeah, we love it. Logically centralized around its subject, physically decentralized in the places where it makes sense, unless logical decentralization is better for that particular use case. So I want to invite some questions in a few minutes. But first, one more question for our panelists. If you could make one feature request to a wallet team in Web3, one little thing that bugs you, whether that's UI change, a color, a button, a feature, what would you request? Tell Wallet Santa what you would like for Christmas this year. I know my old Ledger Nano has typos in it, and that gives me anxiety every time I use it.
I believe this is something that actually WalletConnect is working on, but it would be nice for all wallets. I want to be able to authenticate, like give the app my address and provide a sign in with Ethereum message in just one click, rather than like having to give the address, then having to sign in with Ethereum. Just like one interaction, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that the dreaded mobile wallet double flip problem when you're on that fun app on your phone in a browser somewhere, and you got to use the wallet on your mobile phone, and it just keeps flipping back and forth between your browser window and your wallet is probably one of the most difficult things to deal with when you're testing things too. I think WalletConnect has been working on combining the connect and signature operation. So I definitely agree there. And the other thing is like, I think wallets should always have like a sliding scale of like light mode and pro mode, where like if I switch it to light mode, like just tell me, I've seen this before. I kind of like it and hate it at the same time with like Argent. When Argent has a personal sign request, it just says, hey, it's asking you to sign something, but it doesn't actually tell you what you're signing. But then there's that part of me that's like, hey, I just hit the button. Like the real like lax experience, which is terrible. But then the pro mode where it's like, here's detail down to the last character. But I think if all wallets always just offered that as an option to users, I think would be really fun, because then if you ever wanted to just operate in like lax mode with signing.
Don't you just love looking at your hardware wallet and scrolling through all the bytes and comparing them with whatever transaction you're trying to make?
Especially the elder ledger with the button, just hitting it over and over and over again. And if it's a long message, you're just going. You're there for a little while.
So if any of you in this room feel personally attacked by flipping through your ledger or doing the MetaMask flip back and forth, let us all contemplate these frustrations that we share, because by this time next year, there is enough firepower and intellectual capacity in this room to fix these problems or build ways around them. So in the last few minutes before we wrap up, wanted to invite any questions from our audience. David, GM, how are we feeling?
Everybody, we actually have a microphone right here going around. There we go. Go ahead and ask Wallet Santa what you want.
The DJ takes requests.
Oh, okay, yeah. Hello, folks. Thank you so much for the great session. I had a question on the human readability of transactions. So I really think that the current hex code that just gets displayed when in signatures, I think that doesn't make sense, and that's a major kind of security vulnerability for the whole space. And you mentioned it, and I really echo that it should be standardized so that the wallets could be a great interface to show what users will be actually doing when the transaction is signed. But I feel like many of the wallets are, many of the efforts I feel like are fragmented right now. So each wallets are kind of using it as their moat or competitive advantage against each other, which I think is like a loss for the industry as a whole, since it needs to be standardized and it's impossible for a single entity to take care of all kind of hex code scenarios. So what do you think will be an element that can bring all that together? Or any kind of personal opinions on the current status of those efforts will be really appreciated.
Well, we have a bunch of wallet builders here, and I mean, if maybe like 2 or 3 wallets decide at this conference, like, hey, let's just coordinate on solving these problems, these 3 wallets might actually just outrun all of the other wallets. They're working on their own personal solutions. So I guess go try that.
Big wallet hates this. Learn how they standardize this with one cool trick. That's a big thing. It's like, as soon as you have standards, it helps incumbents catch up. And that's a big thing. It's like, how do you find that balance of that moat where if something isn't standardized and someone's comfortable enough with a certain interface versus standardizing it, now we all have this one thing we can point to as like, this is how it should be displayed. Users win. But it's always incentives of organizations that might be at odds. But I kind of like the idea, if there are a bunch of wallet builders here and you want to conspire on this in particular and maybe submit it to Casa, that might be a good idea. So we like that. We like conspiring.
Casa is chain agnostic standards alliance.
Chainagnostic.org.
And okay, excellent. Chainagnostic.org, all wallet co-conspirators who are ready to solve problems. Come hang with these guys. I would also note that, if you are part of a team who is making design decisions that are harmful to your users, to stick it to the other guys sitting next to you, in this room right now, knock it off. That's not what we're doing here. All right, other questions?
Great job, thank you. I'm with the Decentralized Identity Foundation, so I'm going to try my best to ask an open-ended question. So, Jeff, you made a great distinction between physical and logical decentralization. And any of the panelists, do you want to further talk about what are the pros and cons of decentralization for the logical state?
Sure. I mean, the niceness of a blockchain with everything is logically centralized is, of course, you can just know exactly where to go, you know exactly where to find all the information. Whereas if you have complete logical decentralization. You just have data live on your local computers. Actually, like the early internet is also kind of logically decentralized with everyone running their own servers, right? And so the benefit you get with having kind of full logical decentralization is you can keep things very private. You don't reveal it to anyone. You can encrypt it, store it locally on the device. And as you've moved more towards logical centralization, you can still encrypt data, but it's harder to like actually prevent someone from like accessing that data.
All right. Next question, David.
So the current paradigm of wallets is like mostly browser extensions and mobile wallets, but I think we're all desktop power users here probably. And there's other alternatives as well, like Brave browser has like a native wallet, but like the browser extension just feels so non-native. I'm wondering if there's consensus in the wallet community about where the long-term user, how are we presented with wallets in the future? Is there a gold standard that we're optimizing for, and is browser extensions just the way that it's going to be? Really, the question is like, what is the long-term way that users will be presented with wallets?
I want it in my hardware all the way down to the studs in my Neuralink and all of my devices. Like, I think the more invisible, the better. The more passive our ability to accrue data about ourselves and value and utilize it in the places where we already hang out, the better. But of course, that requires a lot of invasion of the infrastructure that exists today. What do you guys think?
I'm personally of the belief that mobile wallets will probably be dominant, especially globally. Just in terms of like technology access, first devices for folks, see the trend like shifting that way. So part of me feels like it's going to move. I feel like extension wallets will always be like a large option, and still kind of like the dApp experience right now is still best in the browser, which is why I think extension wallets are still pretty dominant. But like globally, as things grow, I think a lot of it's going to shift over to mobile personally, but not as a wallet implementer, but just someone observing.
All right, I think we have time for one more question.
Thanks, guys. On the question of identity, there's the ways you think about that. You have tokens, fungible, not fungible, transferable, non-transferable. One of the other elements of identity is your on-chain reputation, and that's sort of your transactional fingerprint. I have a slight issue with that, where I might expose myself a bit. I have a MetaMask, which has a small amount of money, and I use it to just sybil protocols, bridges, just to try them out. Maybe get some airdrops. And because it's a small amount of dollar value, I kept the private key in the encrypted passphrase of a password manager called LastPass. That got hacked. I see the wince, and I appreciate that. So it got hacked in August. They subsequently released that they've taken the entire vault and are brute forcing it. Now, first thing I did was I stripped all the assets onto a ledger, cold, that's fine, it wasn't worth a lot. But the one thing that I can't strip away is my transactional fingerprint. So any future airdrops that I'm responsible for, I can get them and siphon them away quickly, but who knows, right? Now, I don't care about that, but given people talking about decentralized social, where the value is no longer quantified in dollar terms, but it's actually like, my friends, my community, how do you have an exit ramp for that if someone does something that I did, where you manage your seed phrase in a way that's relative to a dollar value? It's different in the social graph realm. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Don't bind your reputation to keys you can't rotate.
Well, you might actually be able to solve this off-chain. Like, yes, you lost kind of this key, but if you have some way you can like just cryptographically attest to, I had this key at some point in the past, but now it's like, I don't care about this anymore. I either lost control, let's revoke it. And that can just be off-chain data that has this context that can be used as reputation in various applications. It won't be able to you won't be able to use that easily on-chain, but at least it could work for like a lot of, you can use it off-chain if you do like particular things. But I think that kind of thing of just like, here's an account I used in the past, attest to like, okay, this was my account, okay, here's the signatures to prove it, but now I'm not really using this anymore.
That's super helpful. I feel like that ultimately, if you have those sort of situations, it becomes a race to the mempool, in the sense that when people, have protocols that sweep your wallet when you click a link because they embed it in the signature, if you have that kind of structure, it may become part of the default for someone trying to scrape your wallet. But yeah, anyway, this is a problem for further down the line. But just wanted to raise it with you guys.
I think it's a great reminder, though, that we are limited currently in our use of public keys because if there is a nightmare event, for example, someone issues you a soulbound token that says you're an asshole, or your keys get compromised and you're no longer able to control that account in a secure way, right? There's a lot of concentration risk around public identifiers whose keys we cannot rotate when we utilize them in the context of our own lives. And so I think that's why, it's imperative for us to think about what do we express on-chain, what do we express off-chain, how do we make this wallet experience better for everyone. We are now running over, so I want to thank you guys so much for your patience and questions today. Really appreciate your attention, and we'll see you all in the metaverse.